Hello, welcome to our new series of thoughts from the Bible, where we're going to start today looking at the book of Daniel and work our way through that. So really excited for this. There is so much content in this book. And today, just to get us started, we are going to read some verses, but we are going to look as well quite a bit into the culture, the context of what's going on, what's happening in history, of where this happens, the time that this happens, who Daniel is, and that kind of thing. And just to give us a little bit of background as well as starting this book. So have a read. I'm not going to read it out because it's quite a few verses. So have a read, Daniel 1, verses 1 to 17. Have a read of that now. Pause the video if you haven't read it already, just so you know the section of scripture that we're going to be talking about today. So the time of Daniel starts in quite a negative way, really, isn't it? Jerusalem is besieged, and we read of the king Nebuchadnezzar, and he's going to get a lot of mentions over the coming weeks. But in terms of who King Nebuchadnezzar was, he was a king that was really known for his military might. He was a king that would send armies out, would take places. And part of his name, actually, when it's translated into the original meaning and everything that it means, is this idea of protecting the crown, of almost protecting his nation, protecting his country, protecting what he is king of. So part of that we see in the fact he's known for military power and experience and might. But he's also known for the building work that he did in Babylon, the place where he's king. And you may have heard the seventh wonder of the world, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. That was actually created and built under his reign. So he was a king who was known for military power, but was also known for how he built up and developed the town, the city, the place where he was king. There's another side to Nebuchadnezzar that I think it's worth us noting as well. And this will become apparent as we carry on in terms of understanding this side of him, that he was a king who was extremely interested in spirituality. But actually, this idea of pagan spirituality for him was really, really important. So one of the things he did in developing Babylon was he either rebuilt or built temples and shrines so that the people under him could go and worship the various pagan gods that he held in really high esteem, and often instructed or commanded the people under him to go and worship. So it's really interesting for us to pick up that side of him as well. And then we also get mention in these first few verses, before we really get into the body of what we've read today, mention of the tribe of Judah. Now, this particular tribe of Israel at this point had Jerusalem under their jurisdiction, with Jehoiakim, hopefully I've said that right, as their king. And there are various prophecies that come before and after Daniel in the Bible that talk about this particular time in history and Jehoiakim as king, that he didn't listen to God, that he was disobedient to God, that he didn't lead the people, the Israelites, particularly thinking of this tribe of Judah, he didn't lead them back to repentance to God, or back into relationship with God, or true kind of faith with God, but actually was quite a worldly king and wasn't dependent on God and seeing God as being why he was there over the people. So we've got that side to this as well, that the prophecies say why Jerusalem was besieged was partly because of how they were led, the tribe of Judah, how they were led at this time, and they weren't living for God. So we get into the action. Nebuchadnezzar sends his armies with all his military knowledge and experience, and they take Jerusalem, they take King Jehoiakim, they take the people, or a lot of the people, and they also take a lot of items from the temple of God that King Nebuchadnezzar wants to put into his pagan temples items of great value, of great worth, that he wants to use in his own pagan temples. And we hear about, and again, we'll hear a lot of this, and again, a lot of the prophecies around this time and other books in the Bible that are placed in this period of history talk about how the Israelites, how God's people are exiled into Babylon, into a foreign land, into a pagan land. Now, from what I've already said about Nebuchadnezzar, or what you yourself may know, kind of helps us in understanding what Babylon, this place that the Israelites were taken to, is like. A great fortified city. I've mentioned the Hanging Gardens. I've mentioned the temples and the shrines that were built and were there. But where this city is, as much as it's now a ruin and that kind of thing, is in modern day Iraq. It's actually wasn't too far from where Baghdad is now. And if you go direct, or even then went direct, obviously, Jerusalem to Babylon is about, kind of as the crow flies, direct 750 miles. Quite a way. Like, even in a car, that's quite a way to travel. I'm imagining like 10 hours or crazy, dependent on what speed you can go. Even in a car, it's going to be a long way. But actually, in one sense, when you talk about exiles and things like that, actually isn't too far, but they would have obviously had to walk it. However, at that time, they would have walked the usual kind of travelling route. There would have been route and pathways that they would have gone, and a lot of these would have gone by river. Of course, there's a famous rivers in that part of the world. And they would have gone that way, which actually would have added probably nearly another 1,000 miles to their journey, their walking journey into exile that they would have been led on. So we then jump into what happens. So they've besieged Jerusalem. King Nebuchadnezzar's besieged it. He's taken a lot of the Israelites. He's taken a lot of their items, their treasured items in the temple, and he's taken their king. And they've made that exile journey, that 1,000 plus miles, 1,700 mile journey to Babylon. And we then hear about Ashpenaz. That's how I'm going to say it, Ashpenaz, who was the chief court official. And he is given the job by King Nebuchadnezzar to find the best of the Israelites' nobility. So not just nobility or royal birth Israelite young men, but the best of them. And it says in those verses what they had to be like, and in his choosing of the best of the best. And they're being chosen to serve the king. So then Daniel and 3 others are picked. They're part of the group that are picked. And if we go back to what I was saying about the tribe of Judah at this point, they were under a king who wasn't necessarily leading them towards God. So the people that they picked, the young men that were picked by Ashpenaz, wouldn't necessarily have all have been men of faith. Some of them might have been. Some of them might have just had that great outside look of physicality, of good health. But actually, their hearts may not have been after God. Yet these 4, Daniel and his mates, as I like to think of them, were men of faith. They wanted to live for God. And yes, as much as they went with this idea of being picked, of going into these 3 years of training and instruction to be able to enter the king's service, they also wanted to live by faith, wanted to not go against God, wanted to live with reverence to God. And I love, there's a verse that always has stuck out to me in this, verse 9, that says, God had caused Ashpenaz, the official, to show favour and compassion to Daniel. I love that verse. In the midst of this, what I can't hardly imagine, being forced to leave your home, being made to walk thousands of miles to a foreign land where there's foreign gods, where you're being forced to live a certain way, we see God hasn't forgotten them. God is there, God has caused the official over them to have compassion and favour. On these particular guys, God was with them. God was in this. Yes, exiled in a foreign land with foreign gods, but God had not left them. God was with them, and his hand was in this and was with them. And we then read this incredible interaction of Daniel telling the official that he wants him and his mates to go on this different diet. They want to live set apart for God. They don't want to have to live eating and consuming the royal food and wine that for them defiled and went against how God had asked them to live and what God had called them to. And after a bit of interaction, Ashpenaz goes with it as a trial. But it does make me think, could Daniel have just done that and not said anything to the official? Could he? Because there would have been hundreds of guys potentially that were chosen to join or start this training process. Would this official have been that aware, particularly knowing he'd got compassion and favour over Daniel? Would he have even noticed that perhaps they weren't eating everything or they weren't drinking the wine, they were just drinking water? I don't know, but it does make me think, did Daniel even have to draw attention to this? Or could he almost have got away with it without saying anything? And it makes me then, let's put that onto ourselves. Yes, Daniel was taking a step of faith. He was choosing to live a different way, the way he felt God had called him to, and he was drawing attention to it. How much do we live that way? Yes, I'm a big believer in how I live out my faith means I do it, hopefully, as much as I possibly can. And I know I'll get this wrong, but as much as I can with grace, with love towards the people around me, and not perhaps what you might use a phrase of like shoving it in people's faces, but trying to show understanding and compassion and caring in how I live out the calling God has put on my life. But there are times when God calls us to step out and explain why we're stepping out, why we're choosing to live a certain way, why we're choosing to do certain things or not do certain things. And Daniel made that decision over this, made that decision that this was a moment of he was stepping out in faith and he wasn't going to do it under secrecy or see if I can get away with it without being picked up on it. But I'm going to be open about this. I'm going to be honest about what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And he spoke to Ashpenaz, and we see the result. God honoured the choice Daniel made. God honoured the choice of Daniel and his mates to live by faith. And not only did they fare better than those on the king's diet, God also gave them other gifts. Gifts of knowledge, of understanding, and with Daniel, the understanding of visions and dreams. There is so much just in these first 17 verses, more that we could perhaps talk about today. And I want to encourage you, if you've got the time, have a little look more into these 17 verses. Maybe do a bit of research, look into Daniel, his mates, what was going on at this time, the choices they were making, the place they were forced to be in, what was going on. And hopefully a lot of this introduction and what we've kind of said of setting the scene here will help us as we go through Daniel understand a little bit more of what's going on. But I want to encourage us as we start this journey, and today's will be a bit longer as we've had this bit more of an introduction into the book. Let's be reminded of God's faithfulness. There is nowhere we can go, whether through our own choice or through circumstances leading us to be in a different place, to be in exile. There is nowhere we can go. That means God is not with us. God is with us. And often, as we say, God goes before us. Daniel had God with him. God was moving things. He was maneuvering people. He was in what was happening and was helping them. However, even when we know God's faithfulness, even when we see God's faithfulness, even when we trust in God's faithfulness, we still need to step out. We still need to be bold and courageous in living out our faith where we live. And as another strapline we've said for this series is about getting our hands dirty with faith, let's be encouraged today that in knowing God's faithfulness, it will give us and encourage us to have the strength, the boldness, the courage to step out where He is calling us, to look at Daniel as an example in how we can do that where we live. Be encouraged today, and God bless.